Somewhere in prehistory, a teenage girl looked down and saw blood. No one had told her what it was. There was no mom on speed dial, no Google, no older sister with a spare pad in her bag. Just her, alone, staring at something her body did without asking permission. Here's the wild part. This happened to basically every woman who has ever lived. Every single one. That makes it one of the most universal experiences in human history, and somehow one of the least talked about. It's barely a footnote in most history books. So today, we're fixing that. We're going from prehistoric guesswork to a Roman guy who thought periods could kill bees to a WW1 bandage that accidentally built a billion-dollar industry. First, the biology. Puberty isn't just getting older. Your body is running a background calculation the whole time. Do I have enough fuel to support a pregnancy? One influential theory from researcher Rose Frisch back in the 70s says a girl's body needs to hit a certain body fat threshold before menstruation even starts. Later scientists poked holes in the exact numbers, but the core idea stuck. Puberty isn't about age, it's about energy. Your body checks the fuel gauge before it commits to anything. So here's the obvious next question. If it's about energy, when did this actually kick in for a prehistoric teenager? Later than you'd guess. In well-fed modern countries, the average age is around 12 or 13, but researchers studying hunter-gatherer groups like the Kalahari's Unk found menarche happening closer to 16. Harder physical labor, leaner diets, more energy spent just staying alive, all of it pushes the timeline back. So picture that 16-year-old, not 12, experiencing this for the first time thousands of years ago. And here's where I have to be honest with you. We don't actually know what she felt. Nobody wrote a diary. There's no cave painting captioned, "Day 1, deeply confused." Anyone who tells you exactly what she thought is just guessing. What we can do is look at more recent traditional societies, and across a lot of unrelated cultures, first periods weren't hidden. They were marked, sometimes with seclusion, sometimes with an actual celebration, which tells you something important. Treating this as an embarrassing secret looks a lot more like a modern habit than a universal human one. Now here's the part that makes archaeologists want to throw their trowels. Figuring out what prehistoric women actually used is brutally hard. For one unglamorous reason, organic material rots. Moss, soft plant fiber, hide, none of it survives thousands of years in the dirt. So if you've ever seen someone confidently claim, "Here's exactly what cave women used," that's not from a preserved artifact. There isn't one. It's an educated guess, based on materials people were already using for everything else, like wound care. Logical? Sure. Proven? Not even close. Once we hit written history, though, the fog clears fast, because now people were actually writing this stuff down. Ancient Egypt has the oldest known women's health document, the Kahun Papyrus, from around 1800 BCE, directly addressing menstrual issues alongside pregnancy. A few centuries later, the Ebers Papyrus tracks regular versus irregular bleeding as something doctors were expected to monitor. This wasn't whispered about. It was medicine 3,500 years ago. And then, the Romans show up and immediately ruin the vibe. Because while Egypt was treating this like legitimate science, a Roman writer named Pliny the Elder was out here writing an entire encyclopedia about how terrifying periods supposedly were. According to Pliny, a menstruating woman could sour wine just by walking past it, kill entire swarms of bees, dull a sharpened blade, and, I'm not making this up, cause crops to wither if she looked at them wrong. Meanwhile, the Greek physician Galen basically framed periods as a punishment for being lazy, so somehow in the exact same era, one culture is writing medical textbooks about this, and another is convinced it's basically a curse with side effects. Same body, same biology, wildly different reactions. That contrast, legitimate medicine right next door to full-blown superstition, is honestly the whole story of how humans have handled this for most of history. A Greek doctor named Cyrannus eventually wrote a detailed 4-volume medical text simply called Gynecology, covering menstruation with the same seriousness as childbirth, even recommending rest during rough periods, advice that weirdly still holds up today. So the real answer isn't medicine or mysticism. It's both, tangled together, depending on who was writing it down. Now let's fast forward, because the last piece of this story is somehow the most ridiculous. You'd think, with thousands of years of written medical history behind us, that convenient period products would be ancient too. They are not. The first commercial pad, called Lister's Towels, launched around 1896 and flopped because Victorian society thought it was too shameful to even advertise in stores. Nobody could say the word period out loud in a catalog. Then, World War I happened. Nurses noticed that leftover surgical bandage material, a cheap, super-absorbent wood pole product called cellulose, worked way better than the cloth women had been using for centuries. After the war ended, the manufacturer had a giant surplus of the stuff sitting around, and someone finally connected the dots. Only problem, when they tried to get companies to actually manufacture and sell it as a period product, multiple firms refused, calling it too personal to advertise. Eventually, one company pushed it through anyway. In 1920, it hit shelves as Kotex. The tampon with a modern applicator didn't even get patented until 1931, hitting stores as Tampax in the mid-1930s. Let that timeline sink in for a second. Humans have been menstruating for hundreds of thousands of years. The basic, unremarkable products sitting in your bathroom cabinet right now are barely over 100 years old. For nearly the entire existence of our species, women figured this out themselves, generation after generation. No instructions, no packaging, no aisle at the store, using whatever was actually available. So think back to that girl at the very start. No explanation, no products, completely alone with something her body just decided to do. Turns out she wasn't the exception in human history. She was the rule. Every single ancestor you have, going back hundreds of thousands of years, dealt with this the same way, quietly, without instructions, and for most of that time, without shame either. The silence, that's the new part. The rest of it, that's just being human.